Good morning. I am Steve Weber. I am the host of the American Gumption Morning Show, and welcome to show number 50. Wow, can you believe it? In 2.5 months, almost 3 months, we've done 50 shows already. So by the end of the year, I'll have a goal of getting to 100. So that should be easily accomplished. So quite a feat, if I do say so myself. Alrighty, so today is Wednesday, October 14th. Yeah, just about the middle of October. Gorgeous couple of days coming up here in the East. Again, this is my first full year and fall in the East Coast since 1979. So it's been a few years since I've been back in this direction, but here I am. Alrighty, so October 14th, and we have a guest coming up, Brenda Reiss. And Radical Forgiveness is her brand. Brenda Reiss Consulting or Coaching and Radical Forgiveness. So we're going to get into that with Brenda. And I've got a movie life lesson. It's a repeat one. It's just such a good one, and it fits with today's theme. So we're going to repeat it. Make Your Peace with God. So that'll be coming up, starring Lieutenant Dan. That'll be coming up in just a few minutes. And the monologue is going to be self-forgiveness. I've done a monologue on forgiveness. This is a little more specific to self-forgiveness, but all forgiveness, in my opinion, always comes back to self-forgiveness. So, and that's really Brenda's. I'm not stealing any of her thunder just by giving a few of my own examples in the monologue today. Alrighty, so coming up, I'm going to give you the announcement for what's happening the next the next week, really. So Thursday, tomorrow, Lauren Archer and Meditation 101, Meditation the Basics, and also Heart Coherence. So that'll be a fun conversation. If you've done some meditation, if you have a practice, you'll pick up something. And if you are just curious about it, you'll learn what the basics are and how to get started with it. So I've been meditating for a couple of years now on a fairly regular basis, and I've tried several different things, and I'm still I feel like you always feel like you learn something and you get into a bit of a groove, but it always keeps improving and goes a level deeper. So anyway, I'm excited to speak with Lauren tomorrow. Friday and Monday, it's still to be announced. I do not have a guest. I may take one of those days off as a non-broadcast day. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll fill you in on that tomorrow. That's kind of thinking that might happen. And then Tuesday is Walt Keller. And Walt is a gentleman I met a couple of years ago. He's out in Hollywood working as an actor. And so he's he's also a lookalike. And I'll just make you wait and see what it is. So we actually connected from the lookalike thing initially. And so anyway, Walt's a great guy. So he'll be here on Tuesday. Wednesday, Heather Holmes returns to the American Gumption Morning Show, and she is the founder and CEO of P2 Probiotics. And probiotics is we all kind of think of probiotics internal, the gut, but this is an external and your environment. And so these are cleaning products, cleaning for yourself, your body, and for your counters and the place that you live in. So we had a nice conversation several weeks ago, and we're going to come back and we're going to go a little deeper. I'll warn you, this is going to be a little bit in the weeds. We're going to get into the technical part of how this technology actually works. And then Thursday next week, I can announce that Scott Stanfield will be back one more time to the American Gumption Morning Show. And Scott is the modern longevitarian. And Scott's really, his message is, how do you get healthy? So his is really more of a physical, mental, taking care of your body and living a long life. So that's that'll be Thursday's conversation. So we went into sleep last time. We'll dig into some of the other topics this a week from tomorrow. So, and then I don't have anything scheduled yet for next Friday. Alrighty, so that's the lineup. Now let's just go ahead and get into a movie life lesson, and it's going to be the number 15, Lieutenant Dan Makes His Peace with God. Whoops. Ah, boy. All righty, here we go. Let's go back to, I kind of thought that might happen. Open here, do this, close this. Hold on, folks. We're going to get there. Here we are. Your peace with God. Hi, I'm Steve Weber, and today's scene number 15 is titled Make Your Peace with God. I've created this video series of 94 of the best scenes and life lessons from the movie Forrest Gump to celebrate the 25th anniversary of this classic American film.
And let me tell you something about Lieutenant Dan. Forrest. I never thanked you for saving my life.
Lieutenant Dan starts by saying, Forrest, I never actually thanked you for saving my life. He didn't technically thank Forrest. He just acknowledged that he hadn't ever thanked him. Lieutenant Dan was a proud man. That was as much of a thank you as Forrest was going to get.
He never actually said so, but I think he made his peace with God.
Lieutenant Dan never actually said so, but I think he made his peace with God. Forgiveness. Lieutenant Dan was carrying a lot of anger. He made his peace with God. When Lieutenant Dan forgave God, he didn't have to carry the anger any longer. He made his peace with God. It takes gumption to forgive, whether it's forgiving others, forgiving God, or forgiving ourselves. Do you want to be more Gump-like? Forgive. Let it go. Make peace with yourself. Make peace with others. Make peace with your God. Let's learn to live our lives with gumption. All righty, and there we are, the life lesson from the movie, number 15, Lieutenant Dan makes his peace with God. I don't know about you, but I like that scene. That's that always, it's kind of a, that's one of the, that could be a top 10. I had it as number 15, but it's a good one. My monologue today is titled Self-Forgiveness. And I think that's what self-forgiveness ultimately comes down to, is making, peace with yourself, with your God, with the world, with the universe. And I think, when gumption, the number 3 principle of Gumption, the 3 principles of gumption are the feather. The feather comes and floats in. Those are the opportunities that join us in life. And then number 2 is the choices, the chocolate box. And life's like a box of chocolates. You get to choose whatever chocolate you want. You get to choose whatever life you want. And then number 3 is the shoe, the Nike shoe. There it is. Whoops. Yeah, there it is right there. The Nike shoe is that journey of life. And it's all about, living life, being enjoying the experience and being in the moment. And for me, being in the moment and being able to enjoy life really started happening in a new way when I made my peace with God, and when I basically stopped blaming. It's funny, you live life as a victim. You live life finding what's wrong with other people and why things didn't work out for you. And when you come to the conclusion or the realization that gee, everything that I get, I've put out there, I've projected it, and it's come back to me. And so I am in control of my own destiny. Gumption is personal responsibility for your thoughts, actions, and interactions with others. And so, the idea that you can control and you can create your own life is really what gumption is all about. And so, there was, for me, there was a lot of, like I said, I got 2 examples. I'm just going to throw right into the 2 examples. So number 1 was I moved to Montana in, the late 2000s, 2007, 8, 9 time frame. It was kind of like a floating move. So it's a little bit hard to define exactly. So I was part-time in California for a while and part-time in Montana. But by the end of 2008, I was really living in Montana, very end of 2008. So then 2009, all year there. So of course, what happened in 2008, I don't know if you remember, that there was an election that year. Obama became the president, and I was like, I was convinced that what was going to happen was the economic crash that had happened a few months earlier at the end of the Bush administration was going to settle down with the new president. Well, it never quite worked out that way. And I had all of my investments in real estate at the time. And so I was suddenly, cash strapped, and I had to put real estate on the market, and nothing was happening. And of course, I was still working for Bubba Gump, but I was only working on a part-time basis at that point. So my income had radically reduced, and I couldn't get the cash out. Anyway, I had a lot of blame and anger going on. And so as I went into 2009, I ended up doing, that was the year I did a year of transformational work where I dug into myself and said, hey, what do I want? What do I want to create going forward? And so through the help of a personal development firm, Landmark Education, I ended up, going and spending a lot of weekends, doing different work. And think about it. At the end of that year, I was like kind of burned out on doing that. And I wanted to get back into it. But what happened was I really couldn't get momentum going. I had lost momentum from that whole move. And so I was, I had a million excuses of why it didn't happen. And, the economy was against me, and all those things are true that they were, but it wasn't helping that, like, I had gotten into that mindset. So come the end of 2013, and then really into 2014, I had gone back and revisited some of that work I had done in 2009. And I had that realization that I had really been the one to blame, and specifically in relationships. I look back at the different relationships that I had with women over the years, and they all kind of repeated the same exact pattern and always ended up, ending in the same way. And there was never joy in the way they ended. It was always like a frustration thing. And then ultimately what happened was, and I'll be happy to share this story at some time. It was ultimately a realization that it was me. It was, I was the one who was creating the problem. And actually I remember the exact moment when I went, oh my gosh, it's me, it's not them. And it was like, it's like that looking in the mirror and going, oh my gosh, I see somebody there that I never saw before. And so anyway, I remember there was a lot of, sadness and, sorrow over the fact that, nice people I had been involved with in my life. And, it was ultimately my doing that it didn't work out. And what it really turned out to be is I had this big shield around me. I was like a Vulcan with a force field up around me. And so, nobody could penetrate through that. And once I realized that, then things began to change. So I shared those two stories, the moving to Montana and economically things kind of crashing apart and not working the way I had envisioned them. And then, of course, the realization that relationships over my, 50 years were always, following the exact same pattern, and then looking at it and realizing that, it was my doing that had caused this to happen. So I was like, oh, geez, I'm the blame for this. This isn't cool. And so anyway, that was when, moments of self-forgiveness come in, and you go, okay, hey, I'm human, and I didn't do it on purpose. I wasn't intentionally out there trying to sabotage my life and disrupt other people's lives. And so that was a moment of self-forgiveness where I went, okay, I gotta basically be a lot kinder to myself. Otherwise, this isn't going to be, this isn't going to work out. And so that was the moment in time when I made my peace with God, like Lieutenant Dan. He made his peace with God. Well, I went, you know what? It's okay. I'm going to just forgive myself, and I'm going to move on. I'm a human being, and, you have blind spots, and you do some coaching, and you do some introspection, and you do the work, and you figure it out. And once you do that, then you can move on. So that was, really, my awakening moment where I went, okay, there's no sense in berating myself. I mean, I used to, as a kid, you learn, I don't know how you learn this, but you learn to talk really mean to yourself, like, oh, you dummy, you should have done this, and why didn't you know there was going to be an economic crisis that was going to, crash the real estate market for the first time ever, and why did you have your money in real estate, you dummy, and kind of beating up on yourself. And then and so I did a lot of that, and you still do that, but at least I catch myself now doing it and go, okay, is that helpful? Is that helping the situation? So anyway, that for me, that was self-forgiveness. So our guest is going to be, she is the expert in self-forgiveness and in radical forgiveness, not just like moderate forgiveness. We're talking radical forgiveness. So let's bring our guest on, and we'll find out what Brenda Reiss has to say about radical forgiveness. Hello, Brenda.
Hello, Steve. I love your stories. They are so awesome.
Yeah, you've been listening to my stories for a while, so
I know, and that's so cool.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for joining us. And we had a little bit of a weather pattern last night that made us think, geez, is this going to happen? But here we are. There's nothing we can do about the weather. And I said, hey, nothing we can do about it, but here it is. It all worked out.
It did. The wind quit blowing. Thank goodness.
All righty. Well, good. Well, here's Brenda. You've not been on the show before. You and I know each other, and I'll share that story. But the way this works is I have a little bit of a bio that I'd like to read and just let the audience know who you are. And then we have a special first-time guest theme song that we play in honor of any time a person comes. But I want to warn you, if you come back a second time, you won't get this. So this is the first time.
All right. So I'm going to pay attention.
Exactly. So Brenda Reiss has a simple perspective. Each individual life is a journey. That's number 3 principle of the Forrest Gump. Life's a journey. So you're on to something there.
Yay.
Friend. And the biggest decision each of us will ever make is how we wish to spend our life. Either as a victim or as a victor. Victim or victor. I like that. So victims carry an enormous amount of baggage. And here's one of the Forrest Gump suitcases. I mean, it'd be great if that was how much baggage we had. But like we're talking steamer trunks full of baggage that people are carrying around with them. So victims carry an enormous amount of baggage, and the victors, their journey is filled with lightness. It's filled with joy, and it's a fancy-free lifestyle. Brenda knows these truths all too well because she has lived both of them. Brenda has personally experienced abuse, addiction, divorce, major health issues, and several major surgeries. Recovery is important and essential, but forgiveness is the key to restoring and maintaining well-being. Forgiveness of ourselves, forgiveness of others, and even forgiveness of life itself. Yeah, life itself gets in the way, creates our problems.
I know.
So radical forgiveness has helped Brenda transition from being a victim to being the victor. Brenda is certified in a number of intuitive healing and recovery modalities, both traditional and non-traditional. Forgiveness has given Brenda the ability to assist others to step into their own power. Wow. This is a pretty lucky day for us to have Brenda with us. So Brenda, welcome to the American Gumption Morning Show.
Thank you, Steve. I'm so happy to be here.
Now, before we get started, let me play the first time guest theme. All righty.
Okay. love it.
Have you ever had a marching band welcome you to a show of any type?
Never.
Well, we bring out the marching band and the tubas and the trombones. Anytime a guest is a first-time guest. So welcome here to the show, Brenda.
Thank you. I feel very special.
So I'm going to just fill a little bit of the backstory in. So Brenda and I met a year ago. Tamara Fleming is both of a coach for both of us and someone we've become friends with. And we met in doing that work together. And of course, then I became familiar with the work you were doing around forgiveness. And then we've been mentoring and coaching each other over the last 8 or 9 months. And
Yes.
so that's sort of how Brenda and I've gotten to know each other. So we've talked every couple of weeks, maybe every 3 or 4 weeks since the beginning of the year time frame. And so there's like familiarity. And then it became, we had talked about doing some different things that we might discuss, but then just a few weeks ago, it just became obvious that we needed to get you on here and introduce you to it and the work you're doing, because it's very special.
Thank you. I know it's been such a neat journey that we've had together. I think, watching you and going through, right, the meaning of space kind of stuff and cleaning out everything, changing your life, watching your dream come true for you. Watching it right before my eyes was so inspirational. And it's just been so cool to be able to walk this with you, because we had known each other just by Zoom, and then we met a year ago.
Right.
In the summer at the wedding. And that was like sealed the deal. It's like, oh, we're friends for life.
Yeah. So it's funny too. And we both have our own like areas that we're working in. And yet the important thing is that we all need coaching, and we all need encouragement, and we all need friendship, to go along with that. So I have appreciated your wisdom and your willingness to share. And so that's why I thought, let's just share your story and let people know. I mentioned, I gave you that kind of quick idea, but tell people, how what was your life like, 20 years ago, and then kind of fast forward to the point where you really got into radical forgiveness and you went, oh, that's the point. So kind of give people an idea of, where you were and how you got to, the radical forgiveness concept.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So, 20 years ago was not a happy place. And it was actually a very a dark place for me. And so I was in my third marriage and trying to figure out, I was realizing, this seems familiar, kind of realizing that there was something going on with the men that I had chosen in my life, kind of what I call the same content, different package. And I was just miserable. And I thought this wasn't supposed to be this way. So that at that time of my life, I was on the last few years of my drinking. I had started drinking pretty heavily, and I had to kind of cope with the emotions and cope with all the stuff going on in my life. It seems like one thing after the other. And always wondering, seems like there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And I tried therapy. I was trying medication. I was just trying all these different things to help myself feel better. And throughout the years I had done therapy, so I realized that, of course, there was something going on here. So I was trying some different modalities, different things, until finally it was enough. And there isn't really one specific thing. There was a multitude of things, of what I call the wake-up call. There's not specifically one thing, but there were several things that happened. There was an infidelity on my ex's part that really kind of woke me up, and I was so codependent that I wanted to die. I tried to kill myself. And there was a divinely guided intervention that happened that kind of made me realize that, oh, I'm not alone. I'm okay. And I'm going to be okay. And that's what really started opening my heart and my eyes to there's something more. But what is it? What is it? And so it was at that time that people just started coming into my life. Have you had that, where people come into your life that just kind of guide you in these different directions, right? It's really kind of cool. And so So I was guided towards being able to get the strength to leave and to leave that marriage, which opened up this whole different world for me in the sense of really learning about myself, because that's what I hadn't done through the heavy codependence throughout my life. Was I'd given myself away and losing myself. Have you ever done that in a relationship? Lose yourself? So that's what happened. And then it was always asking, I was asking, okay, God, universe, whoever's out there, help me. What am I supposed to be doing? And it was this. I finally got the job that I had wanted. I was the administrative or executive assistant, right, to the vice president of this big company. And it was awful. And he was just like my ex-husband, like my other ex-husband, like my other ex-husband. And I could never do anything right. I was working harder, trying to prove myself, never right. And so my body started to break down. And I started to break down. I was crying every day to work, and I was crying on the way home. And that's all I was trying to do is, what is wrong with me? I can't leave the job, because if I can't do this job right, where else can I go? And so what happened was I finally just got on my knees and started asking, help me. Now, I had already been sober for quite a few years by that time, thank goodness. And so what I did was just started listening. I went to the doctor, and who sent me to another one, and found out I needed a neck fusion and a back fusion. That got me out of that job for a while. And it was during that time, Steve, when I found the forgiveness work. Finally, an answer to prayer, right? To just intention I finally found the forgiveness work. And another divinely guided, when we pay attention, there's little miracles that are happening all the time, all the time around us. And it was at that time that we were going to take a trip to Mount Shasta. And I sent away for those little pamphlets that you get, right, to find out what is in Mount Shasta. I knew I needed to go there, but I didn't know why. And that's when I saw this little advertisement with this teeny picture of this woman. And I went, I don't know, but I need to know her. Have you had those experiences with people where, yeah, I need to know that person? And so, and it said forgiveness coaching. I said, I don't know what that is, but I need to know it. I didn't really know that I was looking for forgiveness coaching. I didn't even really know what that meant, but I knew that I was trying really hard to forgive my ex, to forgive me. And it wasn't working because I kept getting triggered. And by that, I mean that as I was trying to walk in his shoes and understand what was going on and give myself time, all the things that I knew to do is for forgiveness that I was taught. Every time I saw a Metro bus, I would start crying. And that was because my ex was a Metro bus driver. So I was being triggered. So something wasn't being healed inside me going this direction. So when I met with this forgiveness coach, which was another divinely guided act, because she happened to have one opening on the day that I would be able to be there with her. And she helped me see a belief and a pattern that no one else had been ever find. And it connected the dots for me. And it started me on this healing path going, oh my God, does everybody know this? And she's like, no. And I said, they need to know this. And so that's what got me going on this wonderful journey of healing. And I say wonderful kind of through gritted teeth sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny how we go along, and the way I was listening to your story, and the way one thing kind of led to the next thing and to the next thing, and we can't always jump from one point all the way to like the answer, but we can go from one thing to another thing, and like so sort of taking baby steps until all of a sudden, like one of those baby steps, we realize we've just jumped across a big gap there and into a new place and a new zone. So then you met this woman with the forgiveness coaching, and you went, oh gee, this is like, this is the first time in my life that something's like actually the answer, as opposed to just, like a Band-Aid or a fix for temporarily. But then you took it like a step deeper. You didn't just like end there with learning the basics. You kind of dove in pretty deep, didn't you?
I did. And that's what I do.
Yeah.
when something resonates, it's like I go all in. And it was really, it was an amazing process. It was like I read the book, and I went through my other surgery because I hadn't gone through the back surgery yet. And I went through the other surgery, and once I was healing from that, it's like I want to know more. And they had a coaching program online. And then there was an opportunity to work with Colin Tipping personally. Mm-hmm. So I took that opportunity and went, and it was fascinating because I had discovered a belief that I hadn't discovered before with that forgiveness coach. And that was because she asked me, can I tell that story where you found the pattern?
Yeah, I want to know what that story, like, what is it she asked you?
Oh my gosh. So it seems simple, but it was amazing to figure out, because we all have these ways of these patterns in our lives, and some of us know what they are and some of us don't. And so I had kind of known there was something going on. Like I mentioned, I was picking the guys that were emotionally unavailable, right? Not realizing that it was me that was emotionally unavailable. Mm. And so they were kind of mirroring for me. And that's what I learned through this work. And I didn't even know what that meant. But going back to the coach. So when she was asking me about my life, about me, like how many times have you been married, and how many, kids and work and job and all that. I said, well, the first marriage was 5 years. The second marriage was a little over 5 years. And the third marriage at the divorce time was 10 years. And the first job was 10 years. The second job was 20 years. And she looked at me and she said, well, what happened to you when you were 5 years old? And I'm like, well, she goes, you have a pattern of 5 in your life. And I went, oh. I said, well, my dad left. My dad left and moved in with another family. It happened to be my mom's best friend, who had a daughter just like me, my age. That was my best friend. And she said, okay, what happened? And I said, well, he never really paid attention to me. He never thought I was his, supposedly, as I learned later, but he never paid attention to me. But when we went to visit one time to the house, he was playing with her, with the girl, Lori, who was just like me. And I couldn't understand that, at that age, you're like, what's wrong with me? Why are you paying attention to her and not me? And that formed a belief in me, which I didn't know until going through this process and doing this relationship timeline that we get to do, which I highly recommend. And that was where I realized that I had come up with a belief that every man that I love is going to choose another woman over me, or something over me, as it turns out. And when I looked back, that relationship timeline, when I looked back through all of my relationships, that happened everywhere. Dating, marriages, everywhere. It was, there was always something more important than me.
We can look back at this now, and we can look at that story and, without casting too much blame on your father, who
right.
was just a human, who was, he is finding love. But think about, like, he leaves his wife and daughter, and he goes into another woman and daughter, and these are all people who are friends of each other. I mean, what a tangled web that was.
Well, it was exactly, yeah.
So I've done enough work to know that, like, at different stages, like, of childhood, like in the 4, 5, 6 ranges, there's always an incident that starts something off, and then in the early teen years there's something else, and then in the young adulthood. But my goodness, and that becomes a blind spot. You're not aware of it. You kind of have a memory of it, but you don't know what it's doing on that subconscious level. And until someone, and in this case, it was just basically someone asking the question and you thinking about it. And then it was like that light bulb moment when you went, oh my gosh. And once that light bulb goes off, you can't go back. You can't put that back into the darkness. But unraveling it isn't as simple as just like that moment. That's the beginning of it. But pretty quickly you can get through that once you understand it.
Oh, yeah, because it's kind of this aha, what I call this connecting of the dots. So it connected the dots for me. And what I want to say, too, is that everything we're doing is really valuable and important, because everything that I had done in my spiritual growth, my self-development journey therapy, everything had gotten me to that time, to that space, to be able to have that awareness, because there's something that shifted inside of me that day that I have no words for, but it was just this awareness that opened up a whole new level of my learning. And that's when I embarked on the forgiveness journey, I was more open to being aware and receiving and releasing the things that I needed to release, because then I got curious. And that's really valuable, right? As we all know in our journeys, to be curious instead of like steadfast, it has to be this way. And I had spent a lot of my life that way, black or white, because of the fact of safety, because of the trauma that I had had in my childhood growing up, as mentioned, like Steve mentioned in the intro. It's like going through a lot of abuse and going through that abandonment, rejection, going through all of these things. There's a buildup. There's a reason, though. That's the beauty of the radical forgiveness work, was finally realizing there is a reason and a purpose to all this stuff I'm going through, if I choose to look at it that way. And I had chosen to look at it that way.
BrendaReissCoaching.com is where people can contact you, and radical forgiveness or forgiveness coaching is really the main thing in terms of what you're doing and helping people. Talk about the process of somebody reaching out to you and what might be the typical kind of scenario, because I know you work with men, with women. What happens when somebody realizes that they have something that they need to forgive, and they need some help? What do you do?
Yeah, so it's really kind of cool when I work with people and working one-on-one. There's also group classes that I teach, but a lot of people choose the one-on-one with me. So the process that we go through is, first, I get a question a lot about, well, how do I know I'm ready to forgive? And if you have to ask that question, then you're probably not ready. Because when you're ready to forgive, there's just this feeling of, I'm done. I'm so tired of being tired. We've heard that. And it's like, oh my gosh, I keep running into these same roadblocks. The dating scene isn't going the exact right way. I keep meeting these people, but it's not working out. It's like, I'm done. I am ready. And so when that happens is when we get to that sweet spot of being able to, what I call, surrender a little bit to the process. And that's what we're doing. And the beauty of the radical forgiveness work is that you don't have to believe it. You don't even have to think it's going to work. All you have to do is be willing to try something new, to look at something differently, because that's what we do in the radical forgiveness work. We're asking each person to really feel and think about that there's another way, that this is happening for a reason, and it's happening for them, not to them. And that when we look at it from a different perspective, that's when the miracles happen, the shift happens. So when somebody comes to me and, we work one-on-one, I take them through the 5 stages of radical forgiveness, along with some other coaching. So a lot of us have gotten away from a daily practice, or we don't have one. And that's really important to kind of come back home to us. So some people have that codependence when they come to me. They've been working and giving away all of their energy and power to other people, and they're drained. They're tired. And it's like, well, what about me? And that's okay to ask, because if our cup isn't full, we really aren't giving much to other people, as you and I have talked about, Steve.
Yeah. One of the things I like about your approach is that the process doesn't have to take forever. There's not years and years of rehashing all of these things. There's a moment of, kind of figuring out where that, where it all began. But once, just like in your case, when your coach asked you what happened at 5 years old, but so much typical therapy ends up, going through the whole stories and talking about it, and possibly that's helpful in certain ways. And I did my own fair share of hashing the stories, kind of as a cleansing thing. But at this point, they kind of disappear. And the key to what you're doing, though, is once we decide to forgive, it really is over.
Oh, yeah. Because, our stories are valid, Steve. Thank you for bringing that up. Our stories are valid, and there's parts of us that need to be witnessed and validated because those were real to us. They happened. And so that's what we do is when we're telling our story, this is the difference between radical forgiveness coaching, and therapy is the fact of you're not just telling the story over and over again. How many of you have done that, right? We tell the story over and over. We get tired of hearing ourselves, and then our friends around us get tired of hearing the same story. So what she did and what I do with my clients is she's listening for certain things in the story. There's a reason to tell the story, to connect the dots, to be able to pick out the patterns. Because there's name patterns, there's number patterns, there's synchronicities. And, that a lot of my clients have found. There was one of my clients that had an 18-month pattern. She would switch relationships about every 18 months. Then she couldn't figure out why. And that was her brother was born. She was 18 months old. And she had always had trouble, feeling left out because he was a sick child and, the parents were giving him all the attention. She felt at 18 months, felt abandoned. And she carried that through her life until we started working together and she identified it. And then she could release that pattern. And so the reason for the stories are really valid. There's a specific reason, and we don't hash over and over again because we take that story, because that's where all the golden nuggets are. And we take that story and then we take it through the stages of radical forgiveness. And then we take it and we pull out the information that we need to be able to get to that point of release that you were just talking about. Because once we do this, we're done. It doesn't have to be 20 years. When they started this forgiveness work way back in the 80s, 90s, they were doing studies that said that it was going to take people 20 years to forgive. And, when they started this work with radical forgiveness, it was working with cancer patients. And they're like going, I don't know if I have 20 years.
Yeah, right.
It's so valuable to know that there is another way out there that can really, really kind of speed up the process. Now, I will say that there's a little bit of a trick to it, and that's the fact of we just need to be willing. We need to be willing to look at it a little differently. And as you and I both know, as we've talked about, is to be willing to release the story. Because sometimes we're not ready to release it. And that's another really cool way to talk with a coach, because sometimes you're not ready. And you want to be ready, but you're not quite ready. So a coach can help you to identify ways to be ready, depending upon your individual circumstances and situation. Because there's some traumas that need some other help. There are some things that we need some other guidance for. Because I don't think that there's a one-pronged approach, as you and I have talked about, to development, right? We need some different ways and different things to help us. But I'm going to tell you, this forgiveness work is amazing. And it's really changed my life, because in this work, we realize that all forgiveness is self-forgiveness. And that's really what we're here for, is to heal our hearts and to heal our minds, hearts, so that we can really be here, so we can give fully, authentically, and clearly to everyone around us.
Brenda, I have one comment, and then I have questions. So the comment is, when you said the 5 years, when your coach asked you about it, and then you talked about the 18-month cycle, it immediately made me think, what cycle am I going through? And I'm guessing everybody out there is listening and thinking the same thing in terms of like, gee, okay, what is that time pattern? And is that time pattern like always kind of, relate back to where it all began?
Yes, it relates to not only, well, let me take this back. It relates to some sort of significant experience. I'm not going to say trauma or wound, but it's a significant experience that was your kind of jumping off place.
So you have this moment, this experience that traumatizes you, and it may not be like, it's not like, it's just like somebody slights you and somehow you get offended, but to you it's highly personable, and to your family around you, they don't even really notice this happening. It just happens, and yet then that triggers some kind of a, cycle that just keeps repeating itself, and ultimately it's kind of based on a deep-seated fear that we have, a fear of rejection or of not being loved.
Not being good enough. That is what we commonly share is that I'm not good enough.
Mm.
And it shows up in different ways. Even people that look like they have it all together, they're, millionaires, they drive the cars, they have the great, life, whatever they're looking for, they too feel not good enough.
Yeah.
And it shows up, it manifests differently for all of us in our lives.
Yeah.
And so it's really taking, that's the uniqueness. That's the unique part of us, right? We share a lot of these commonalities, but it looks different. So we don't think we're the same, but it is the same.
We have about 10 minutes left. Do we have enough time to spend a minute or two on each of the 5 steps? And would you want to just kind of give like a brief idea of what that's all about, what the steps are?
Oh, absolutely. I would love to do that for people. Yeah. So when we go through the stages of radical forgiveness, it is done in order. It's kind of important in the sense of, because it helps build on the other. And for those of us that are a little more analytical, like I was, this is one of the reasons I loved this work, was because it gave my head something to do so my heart could heal. And that means it helped get my head out of the way, because if you're an analytical person, you spend a lot of time thinking and in your head, and you're skeptical, which is really good to be, by the way, in this process, because it works in spite of us. So the first stage of radical forgiveness is telling the story. And that's the part that is the best part, because I get to like spew it all out. I get to be the victim. I get to say, this is what happened to me. And I get to share it with somebody who's holding me in a loving space, who's holding me in a non-judgmental space. And I get to share because I know that there's a reason for sharing this story. I'm not just blabbing on and nothing's going to come of it. So when we have that, we tell the story, and that's, as a coach, I get to listen and I get to validate and I get to help hold you in a space, because it's important to know when we've been hurt that we're going to be okay. And in that, I'm looking for those synchronicities and oddities and patterns. So we take that information. And during this time, it's really important. And this seems to be the hardest step of all. And that's feeling the feelings. Because a lot of us we can cry at commercials, we can cry at weddings, or we can cry when we're really hurt. But do we really allow ourselves to authentically feel what we're really feeling? A lot of us use distractions, because when we're little and we've been traumatized or hurt, we bury it. We don't know it's there a lot of times. And so it gets buried and buried and buried and buried. And what happens is kind of like a beach ball that you're pushing down, down, down underwater. Have you done that? And it slips up and it goes kaboom. That's what can happen with our feelings and emotions when we stuff them down. So going through this process, we learn some different tools and techniques and ways that we can get to those feelings and really authentically allow them out, so that they don't cause dis-ease in our bodies and they don't cause tension and frustration. So that's a really big kicker there. And going through our stories and allowing ourselves to really feel the anger and the hurt and the happiness that we deserve. And then we go into the third stage, and this is where we separate the what we call traditional forgiveness, what we may have learned, because a lot of us learn, oh, you just need to walk in their shoes for a little bit, and you just need to give it time, and it's going to be okay. And we're not really taught a way to forgive, except for let it go. Well, how many of you have been told to let it go? And I'm like, let what go? What am I supposed to let go? That person hurt me. How can I let this go? So we learn, this is where we collapse the story. And it's a beautiful space, because this is where we separate fact from interpretation. And I'll tell you what that is. And that is, in my story back to my dad leaving, what we did was, when we collapsed the story, what we do is we look at what happened. What was the actual fact of the situation? The fact is, like Steve, like you mentioned, he left. He was a guy, they got divorced, he left, he found love in a different space. So the fact is that he got divorced. The interpretation was all the stuff I made up about it. All the stories, the beliefs, the patterns, all of that came from that. That's where the suffering comes from. So I made up that belief that, oh my gosh, every man that I love is going to choose another woman over me or something. I also thought, and this is what came in through the work, was I also found that love is hard. You have to work hard, that there's something wrong with me and that you couldn't love me for me. Right? I made all that up because that's what we do as children. We're very egocentric as kids, right? It is about us, and that's what we make up. And so I found that out when I got to write that out. So important and so valuable, because it was like, oh my gosh, that's not true. But that's where all the learning came from. It's not just suffering, but it's learning too. And that's where we move into the radical forgiveness step, which is the reframe. And the reframe is where we choose to look at this differently. This is where we look at it as, maybe this happened for me and not to me. What was the gift in that? Or what was the benefit? Because have you ever had a story or something happened to you where you look back and you go, oh, it's good that I broke up with that person because then I met the right person. Or it's good that I lost that job or I quit that job when I thought I was going to be devastated, but then I found this other job. So there's a reason that this happens, and we're not really trained to look at it that way. So the reframe is where we look at it from what we call a higher perspective. We look at it from a bigger picture to go, oh, I am really willing to believe that this is happening for me, not to me, and that I can look at this in a different way, and that these people play a role for me. Very valuable. And it's a harder step to get to. That's why we go in order. And then the fifth step is where it's an integration step. This is where we speak things out loud, we get some movement in there, and we are able to release the old energy, the old beliefs. We do that through movement, through talking, through sharing, through some different tactics that we go through for together, depending upon personalization, depending upon that person. And then you bring in the energy of the new story. How do you want to be moving forward? What do you want to create? That's what I call stepping into your own power, because how many of us are living a life that we don't want? There's a lot of my clients that have chosen their careers or chosen their life path because they thought they had to, or it was an easier way, but they're dying inside because it's not authentically who they are. And, and it's like having a dream, but setting it aside. And that's what we do through this process. We learn, where are those parts of me that I have set aside? It's really valuable to find out. And it's like you, Steve, watching this dream come true, right? And being able to get to that spot where you could make it come true.
Yeah. The 5 steps, I'm just going to repeat them as I heard them. You tell the story, you feel the feelings, you think about the traditional forgiveness thing and of letting it go, which doesn't work, but you somehow collapse the story. And so you figure out what the truth of it is, as opposed to what the interpretation had been.
Yes.
And then the 4th step is the radical forgiveness, and you're reframing it, and you're saying, this happened for me as opposed to me. And so you give up being the victim in that one little step right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, the integration portion. As I was thinking about experience in my life where I called up a friend. I had this disappointment in my life, and I called her up and I told her about it. And I remember I said, no, this will be good. This will all work out. And I was like jumping to, step 4, kind of passing over step 2. And she encouraged me to actually just be okay with feeling it. And I, as I look at my own life, that was one of those things that I learned how to do very well as a boy. And that was to not feel.
Well, and it's called a bypass, right? We're bypassing. So a lot of people who think, oh, I need to forgive. This is where having a coach is valuable, because it's like, no, sometimes it's not time to forgive yet. Sometimes we really need to allow ourselves a space. So not bypassing, what you're talking about is bypassing those feelings and jumping into, oh, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Thinking positive is important, but also honoring yourself and where you're at and the feelings is more important.
Yeah. And it's really mourning, mourning the loss, or or just embracing the experience for what it was, and just being present with it for some amount of time, as opposed to like pretending it just didn't happen.
Exactly. And that's one thing that people don't realize. If you allow the feelings to happen, if we don't bury them, they'll dissipate within about 90 seconds. If we allow ourselves the feeling, the sadness. Now, grief is a different story, right? But if we allow ourselves to be hurt for just that period, we're meant to feel it and have it like go through.
Yeah, I made that little face there because I'm thinking about the the years of suffering instead of the 90 seconds of suffering that I could have used anyway. But I'll forgive myself because I'm human, and we're going to move on with it. And so anyway, well, this is great. What else do we, in the last couple of minutes, what else do we need to share with people? Of course, we want to, anybody who would benefit from forgiveness, I want them to contact Brenda at brendareisscoaching.com. And it's easy to get a hold of you once they go to that website. So that's simple enough to do. But what would you like to say as we kind of wrap up?
Well, what I'd like to say is that forgiveness doesn't have to be as hard as we think it is. This is like a misnomer that I have discovered. And is it a journey? Absolutely. Is there some, holding on with like scrunched fingers and, when we're trying to let go of our stories? Absolutely. But doing it with a coach and with somebody who can hold this beautiful space for you is really helpful. That's what I have found. And I want to also encourage you to check out Radical Forgiveness. There is a book that you can read that a lot of people have found so helpful. So read the book, Radical Forgiveness. It's on Audible, and it's also, you can get the book form if you're like me and like to have tangible books in your hand. And also you can check me out on Instagram too with @Forgiveness Coach. Because it's there that I also give a lot of information and inspiration, because we need that when we're feeling like we are today. There's a lot going on, and we're being triggered. A lot of our stuff is being triggered. And what I want to say to you is, like, if we can breathe into it and allow it, identify it, do that relationship timeline, look back through all of your life and see what the commonalities were in each thing, then you can help to find your beliefs and patterns that way. And then reach out for help and reach out for guidance, because it's in there that we can find the relief to get to the peace, to get to the happiness that we're seeking.
Well, Brenda Reiss, this has been a fun conversation and a learning experience for me. I really did. I knew parts of the story, but I didn't know the whole thing. So I sure appreciate your coming here and sharing it, and actually, going through the 5 steps of radical forgiveness. And I again want to encourage people who would benefit from getting rid of the suitcase that they're carrying full of drama and past memories that just don't serve anymore. And if you need some help, then reach out to Brenda and learn how to radically forgive and move on with your life.
Thanks, Steve.
All righty, so that's it. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll have to have you back sometime. I'm sure that forgiveness is not like a one-step process, or it's a 5-step process, but we'll see about at some point. If you're always welcome to come back. Let's leave it at that.
Thank you, Steve. I'd love to. You are such a joy.
Well, thank you, Brenda. All right, we'll see you next time. All right. Well, that was Brenda Reiss. Boy, that was great. And I knew some of that story, but I did not know all of it. And I certainly, got more familiar with the 5 steps. We had talked all around the different steps and gone through different pieces of them, but in that particular order, it just made a whole lot of sense to me. So anyway, that's it. I'm going to wrap up today's show. I want to just let people know that tomorrow, Lauren Archer will join us, and we're going to go through Meditation Basics 101 and Heart Coherence. And then on Friday and Monday, it's still to be announced. I may end up taking one of those days and not doing a live show. I'm still figuring out my schedule. But on Tuesday, Walt Keller, who is a Hollywood actor and also a fellow look-alike. He will be here on Tuesday. On Wednesday, Heather Holmes returns, and we're going to dive deep into the technology and science behind the P2 probiotics, the health products that she has. And then on Thursday, Scott Stanfield comes back, the modern longevitarian, and he will continue the conversation on how to live a long life. So that's it, everybody. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we will see you all tomorrow. Have a great day.